There's a lot of aspects of video game history that don't really get talked about very often. Things like, one of the examples that I keep going back to is the history of digital distribution. A lot of people think that it started with Steam, and it really didn't. There were many systems vying for your wallet and your attention in the early 2000s and even the late 90s. In fact, going back even further than that, there's a lot of history there. The one that I frequently talk about and have spoken about many times in the channel's history is Real Arcade. And the whole, they did Game Pass first. And yes, Dad, after all these years, I'm coming clean. It was me. I did borrow your credit card when I was about 10. But let's not worry too much about that now, eh? There were other things like Wild Tangent and Nintendo's Satellaview, I'm sure counts, and the Sega thing, whatever that was called, where you could download games and play them for a bit. That was a different sort of thing to the digital distribution as we know it now. But there were all sorts of systems back in the day that you don't really hear much about. And there's other things. I mean, I thought of a topic that I thought would be interesting earlier. The history of fast travel. Not something you would even think about, because most fast travel implementations in video games, it's just open map, click on a thing, and there you go. But it wasn't always that simple. I mentioned this in a stream, I think last week. RuneScape's system. I've been playing that a lot, as you can probably tell. You have to earn your fast travel. You can't just fast travel from the off. You don't just go to a town and suddenly you can immediately get there. No questions asked. You have to train to do it, or you have to unlock certain abilities, or you have to get certain items that allow you to travel to different places. And sometimes you got to travel to a place to travel to a place. Things like that. And I'm sure I thought about that topic based on that, but I'm sure there must be other implementations of fast travel that are interesting. And the reason that I would probably want to make a video on such a topic, mundane and meaningless as it may seem, video game history is, it's still a part of the history of video games, and it's still an interesting thing for perhaps budding game developers to look at and think, oh, okay, so that's how they did it. Maybe my fast travel system in my open world game that I'm making doesn't have to be as simple as just click on a thing and there you go. Maybe it can be a bit more fitting with the world that I'm making. I mean, there's a billion and one other topics because video game history is just that vast. I mean, you could talk about video game books. That's quite a big thing nowadays, but it wasn't always. And I mean, I've got a book from the 90s called Game Over. I used it partly for research in my Donkey Kong video, and that's just a book. That's not like your nice, high quality, very expensive, printed coffee table books like it is up there. The Art of Point and Click Adventures is in this box. Totally the right place for it. One of the Bitmap books, I think one of the earliest ones they did, in fact. They weren't always like that. And even things like art books that you get with physical collector's editions weren't always like that. So I would be fascinated to look at the history of that as well. There's a great resource, VG Library I think it's called, that documents books about video games and books related to video games. It's not like you can download them for free because a lot of them are still available for purchase, but it does let you know where you can get them from. And it goes back quite a distance. And things like magazines. Magazines are a great ancillary resource in that study, because magazines are books. They're just thin books. Simple as that. Anyway, that's what's been on my mind today. So do let me know if there's any aspects of video game history that you think are underspoken about and is underreported a word? There is a word that I'm thinking of, but it's not forthcoming. You know what I mean? Underrepresented, perhaps. Aspects of video game history that you think are underrepresented. Because I would like to know, and maybe one day I'd like to do a video on them. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all tomorrow. I've got some pasta to make.